Hello, welcome to 1 Hour SaaS. This is update for hour number 11. I am Mubashir Iqbal. Everybody calls me Mubs. I'm building podcast ping. And today I focused on just finishing out the data model work that I started in the last hour. We'd got podcasts and checks and check types set up. Um, in this hour, I kind of focused more on um, what happens when there's an error or when there was an error and you've now um, resolved and that error has been resolved because the website's back up or whatever. So we're going to send notifications to users or to teams rather, and so there'll be email addresses that we need to associate with the team. So where do we store that information? There'll be phone numbers if we're sending SMS messages and things like that in the future. So how and where do we store all that information? And then just kind of log. So like when there's an error, you want to log the fact that there's an error, but then you also want to log the fact that you sent emails to this email address or that email address, or you sent SMS messages, and where's the API IDs and things like that. Let's say we use Twilio or something like that, and they've got APIs. We can store the IDs of the messages that we sent so that they can be tracked back and looked at and sort of that kind of stuff. So I spent most of my hour on that. And then I did have about 15 minutes left when I finished all of that stuff. And so I started thinking about like how to actually configure and manage all the actual checking that we're going to have to do. So different monitoring and things like that. Um, and so for that, I started looking around at just some open source libraries that exist, some packages for PHP that do some of these kind of things, but not exactly how we want to do it, and obviously not for podcasting. And so, but more just trying to understand how they structure these things because we're going to have lots of these things. They're going to share some traits, but then they're going to be very specific features and functionality for each of the checks as well. So I was curious to see how people organize that um, in kind of an object oriented way as well. So I spent some time thinking about that after I'd finished up the sort of models and stuff that I had. So just a quick little run through, I guess, on some of the tables and things like that we did set up. So if we go check out the code real quick, you'll see that we added, there's a table called notification emails. And so this is going to be the list of email addresses that a team has selected. So we've got the team here. There'll be an email address, there'll be pause, and we want to verify the email before we actually send the notifications there, just so we don't spam people who don't want that particular email. So basically, what will happen is when somebody adds one of these to podcast ping, we'll send an email to make sure that they actually want to receive those emails. And then we added a pause. I added a pause feature, so if somebody's going on vacation or something and they don't want to have it sent to that email address while they're on holiday or whatever, then they can just hit pause without having to remove all of that stuff as well. And then, so these are the actual notification checks, or these are the check notifications. So if a check results in an error state or a recovery from an error state, we're going to send messages. And so this is going to be the podcast ID that the check was for. This is the actual check ID itself. I guess we don't, strictly speaking, need the podcast ID there because we can get that from the check as well, right? Like we have the podcast ID, but that's kind of just a little shortcut because then we can just we can query that easily without having to do another join through the check table as well. Um, and then we have a status which will change based on how we queue all these messages up, that actually all these emails and things that have to go out, and then when we finish that as well. And then for each of the actual messages that we send, I wanted to keep a log of all of those as well. So we have the type, which will be email or whatever. This is the actual notification. This is the status of that. So again, if it's something we have to queue up and send out SMS or Slack messages or email or whatever, we can kind of keep a track of that. Any information that we need to track, is going to be here. Now, I just kind of have these like fields for kind of storing all of that stuff, and that's mostly just because I don't know what information we're going to need to store, right? So with emails, you've got maybe just keep a log of the full email that we sent, and so we just kind of throw that in there. For SMS messages, it gets, there's more information, that we get back from APIs and things like that. If it's a Slack, maybe we would kind of have the API log or just the API response that we got from the API, which allows us to kind of store that and kind of look that up and kind of show people what we actually sent. In some cases, we may want to retry these, right? Like if it's an email and we get like just like a service unavailable or whatever, we might just want to retry those as well. And then at some point, we may just want to give up and say, look, we tried to send it, but like the API was down or whatever. We just can't retry forever. And if you're retrying, then we kind of have this retry at field. And then when the status is that we actually sent it and everything's okay, then we kind of have the completed that field as well, just to kind of have that there as well. I did make a change to the podcast table. So for all the checks that we have that are enabled, I also have a status field, which is essentially we haven't checked it. Because it's kind of an unknown status. It's just a string field. Oh, it's not a string field because I didn't update that. So let's just quickly fix that, and I will update my DBs. So this is just going to be status is going to be like unchecked because it was just added, or it's just something that's not configured. So we don't check those. It'll be okay or it'll be error. We can kind of figure out what the terminology is that we want to use across these so that they're all consistent at some point. And I'll set up some enums so that we consistently use them throughout the application as well. I don't typically like to put defaults here because then we're kind of decoupling where we kind of define all those things, right? Like if I hard code stuff in here, then it's set in the DB, and if I ever want to change it, I have to go and change it in the DB rather than changing something in the code and have it override that. And yeah, we might still be able to do that, but then why set a default if we're expecting to set the default when this thing is created anyway? So I think that's it. Yeah, that's about all I got up to today. It wasn't a huge amount, but I spent more time kind of just doing research about how to organize things. The next hour, the plan is to start thinking about the UI for a team to be able to go in and add a podcast and configure all these things that we need. It might take a little bit longer than the hour since I want to integrate with the iTunes API to allow people to search for their podcast or any podcast. You don't have to monitor your own podcast. You can monitor other people's podcasts, I guess, if you wanted to do that. That may be something that I end up doing as kind of a growth hack. Maybe there's a way to kind of monitor and track specific podcasts, and we can kind of ping people when their podcast's offline and things like that. But that's way down the road when I start thinking about sales and marketing and growth of this thing. But that's an option too. And so that's all gonna it's all gonna appear over the next few hours, I think, in terms of just the whole interface of setting up the podcast, managing all the different fields, and managing the emails that we want that podcast that for that team where we're going to send the emails when things are offline. And yeah, so that's going to happen over the next week, and we'll kind of see where we get by the end of that. And I don't think I have like a target date yet set of when I want to launch this. With this strange challenge that I'm doing with this 1 hour limit, I don't feel comfortable putting markers down in terms of when I think I'm going to be finished because things are taking a little bit longer than I expected. Not in terms of actual number of hours worked, but just in terms of calendar days, really, in terms of that. So I don't know if it's going to be a week from now or or less. But yeah, I mean, like you said, next is like the sort of interface of adding podcasts and all those associated attributes, and then we'll get into actually doing the checks and sending the emails and doing that. That should come along pretty fast after that. And again, we'll start with kind of one check, have it work through the system, but we'll build it in a way where we expect that check. Could be any kind of check, and then so we'll just kind of build the system for one check, and then all we've got to do is just add the ability to kind of run on those kind of other checks within the same architecture that we have kind of set up. And then that way we don't have to kind of re-architect something every time. And so yeah, so that's the plan, and we'll keep plugging away. And 1 hour SaaS, 1 hour a day. We'll see how long it all takes. It'll be very fun to get to the end of this and kind of revisit and see what I could have improved and what I could have done better, and hopefully people are taking some pointers from this as well, and it's helping them out too. Okay, until next time.